Hello, this is the Green Report, Rappler show in the environment and the stories of people whose decisions impact the world around us. I'm Jee Geronimo.
And I'm Iya Gozum.
We didn't mean to ghost you pero sa dami ng nangyari, 2 buwan na palang nakalipas
2 months
since our last episode. Kung medyo na-miss nyo kami, don't worry. In this episode, we'll get you all caught up sa mga latest environment issues from the last 2 months. Ang dami na pala.
Madami-dami na rin.
Oo.
And I just remembered, you said the word ghost. Ghost month ngayon actually.
Ay, talaga ba?
So, kung mag-disappear pala tayo, dapat August pala.
Right.
But
pero
we're here.
we didn't ghost you this one. We're here and we're ready to catch you up with the issues. Ang dami actually, medyo madami-dami. Hindi rin namin in-expect. When we were wrapping up the issues from the last episode, parang that was just the first half of the year.
Or first quarter of the year.
First quarter pa lang ba yun? Hindi ba first?
Ganun katagal ba tayo nawala?
Ganun tayo katagal nawala. So, but the last 2 months were just as eventful. If not, baka nga mas eventful pa than the first half of the year. So let's start. Ano ba yung pinakauna nating gustong balikan since our last episode? It's of course the State of the Nation address.
Yes.
Ang ating inaabangan na speech.
Inaabangan na ng buong newsroom when the time comes around.
Yeah. And I think the public also, in some way or another, na inaabangan din ito kasi it's a report of what has happened in the last year.
What has happened and what will happen.
And what will happen. For us, at least for journalists, that's what we look into kung ano yung mga i-mention ng President as priority niya. And especially for our cluster, the environment cluster, ano yung mga priority in the environment.
And of course, what he didn't mention.
What he didn't mention. It's the in-between lines. Okay. So ano nga ba minention muna ng President? So actually, sobrang, hindi ko maalala if mas onti ba this year than last year? Or
Hindi ko rin maalala, but I think may factor yung nauna, yung climate agenda sa speech niya. But then again, this president... parang tapos agad siya.
This president naman from the very start, he's always spoken about climate change.
Yeah.
Parang actually, hindi siya nag-shy away from mentioning
it is part of
climate
his rhetoric.
change.
Always part of his rhetoric.
As opposed to the previous president. But it's the details It's what is said in regards to climate change. So, of course, climate change was mentioned. Our hosting of the Loss and Damage Fund Board was mentioned.
That's a big development na nangyari lang a few weeks before.
Right.
So, inuna niya talaga.
And I guess kasi yun nga yung biggest story to say in your speech. Malamang i-include mo talaga yon. And then the other things that he mentioned, pero ano na lang ito, it's more on the infrastructure, on disaster
risk reduction?
Yes, risk reduction.
Flood control.
In adaptation. So that's the flood control projects. Meron on waste management in the barangay level, which is my first time hearing. Meron palang ganong initiative. And also, very onti lang on the rehab of Ilog Pasig.
Kasi that's their pet project of the first
Na-mention
lady.
ba ang Pasig ever in the previous? Parang hindi, no?
I don't think so. Kasi parang dapat nalagay ko siya dun sa in-depth ko about Pasig River and the Philippine presidency. I don't think so.
So I think this is the first time talaga na minention niya sa speech
but that's just one
and
sentence.
it's one line. It's just one line.
I was expecting na parang baka meron pang elaboration on what will happen. Pero yun, one line lang, one sentence lang. Kasi
that there is a project. That there is a program.
Because if nag-elaborate pa siya, that would have been another separate story for me.
Gabi, wala naman akong sinisingil, Iya.
Well, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Yes. So sobrang when we talk kung ano yung, kasi pinarap lang natin yung story kung ano yung mga environment policies na minention. And it's the topics that were not mentioned. And what we think should have been mentioned. Or actually, dapat in the previous speeches pa lang, in previous years, ako personally, it's still the environmental defenders. In September, we expect the annual report to come out. And as usual, kasi we have been
kung pang-ilan yung Pilipinas.
Kung pang-ilan yung Pilipinas.
Gano'n ka-dangerous ang Pilipinas.
Right. And we have been the most dangerous country in the world for environmental defenders in Asia.
How many
for
years?
the last 10 years.
For the
10
last
years
decade.
straight. Yes, for the last decade. So, I think that's something that should have been mentioned in the president's speech. What do you think so?
Okay. So when of course we will write a wrap of the environment angle ng SONA, parang I was looking at what wasn't mentioned, but also I was working with ano ba yung tema niya. Like of course I'm not expecting him to talk about environmental defenders. Parang hindi ko na yun ine-expect from the president because that would admit na yung malaking lapse sa human rights space, no? Or implementation of laws. But what we did mention, what we did see at least, doon sa, at least sa tema na sinusundan ng president, because it's a president that speaks openly about climate change, knows the rhetoric, diba? Knows the lingo.
Right.
Ang nakita lang natin is he did speak about loss and damage, so those were the irreversible impacts. And he spoke about flood control projects, so these are adaptation measures. So, merong konting sense ng reactive kasi we're adapting, we're adjusting. Yun yung mga nire-report natin. How we're adjusting to climate change. How do we finance yung mga naging damage na because of events that was exacerbated by climate change. Pero for a president that talks openly about climate change, about the climate crisis, we didn't hear anything about mitigation. So mitigation in climate parlance is paano natin mababawasan yung emissions. So basically, parang going to the root cause.
Right.
Kasi ano ba yung nagkakos ng climate crisis? Emissions. So of course, we have to reduce that. But we didn't hear anything about that.
Compared
siguro,
to last years,
siyang
kasi diba last year sinabi yung tama ba, tripling of renewable from last year's? Or basta an accelerated?
COP siya?
Hindi, ano yan, sa SONA. SONA. Sa SONA.
Okay,
anyway, pero ngayon, meron din naman line on renewable but hindi siya ganun ka, hindi nag-focus doon yung speech ni President.
Yeah, and then there was no mention of course of paano natin maiwasan yung reliance on fossil fuels, on how do we address widespread deforestation. So those are the things that we missed. At least I missed. from kung yun yung susundan nating tema, mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, kung dyan na tayo maglalaro sa espasyo na yan, parang that's what we didn't
right.
hear.
But environmental issues go beyond, of course, climate change. Meron ka bang other environmental issues na tingin mo dapat na pagtuunan din ng pansin ng presidente?
Conservation okay. of wildlife. Hindi rin siya na ngayon mahihiwalay ngayon sa climate
right.
Kasi if you wanna conserve endemic species, threatened endemic species in the Philippines, syempre papasok din yung usapin ng kailangan mo i-reforest, kailangan mo i-conserve din yung habitats nila. And at its root, conserving their habitats kind of goes against some ethos of development that we have now.
And I think when you look back in our year 2 story, when you also look back at what has been part of the headlines in the environment sector in the Philippines, diba? The management of protected areas.
Yeah.
I think that also, yun nga, it merits parang, kumbaga, a mention in the president's speech because it has been talked about a lot in the past year.
And also yung year 2 story natin talks about protected area management because kasi yun yung pinaka glaring na issue
right.
at least dun sa second year ng presidency ni Pangulo. So ayun, wala tayong narinig about it. So lumabas yung issue sa Mount Apo, sa Chocolate Hills, and so on and so forth, but we didn't hear anything about protected
right.
area management.
So why is it important to want to hear? Kasi baka ang pwedeng sabihin nila, a president can only say so much in a speech.
Totoo naman.
At hindi lang naman environment ang issue sa Pilipinas, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, madami.
So, but why do we keep monitoring the president's speech. Why does this matter for us as environmental reporters?
Kasi it could spell the direction of policy.
Right.
So, dahil sila yung mga kinauukulan, what we expect from them is to implement policies, to make laws that would safeguard rights, that would safeguard the environment. So, what is mentioned and what is mentioned and what is not mentioned in the SONA could at least give us an indication of where the administration is heading. What we could expect from them, what we couldn't expect from them.
Or where their priorities lie.
Where their priorities lie, right.
Diba?
And ano yung vision nila when
Right.
it comes to climate action, and it comes to environment justice. Parang, how do they see these issues? Kasi syempre importante yun when you're crafting laws and when you want to hold them accountable.
Right.
Of course, you hold on to their words.
Also, yun nga, one of the things na na-mention ni President is the Loss and Damage Fund Board. And it's also a cue to the Congress because he has a line there, di ba?
Yeah.
Na how to operationalize it or how
To make
it needs a law.
to have a magbigay ng legal framework dun sa Loss and Damage Fund Board.
Right. So it's like telling Congress, okay, kailangan ko to.
This is a priority.
I need you to focus on this. We're happy that that climate change is part of the president's speech, but I think all the other issues that were not mentioned, the silences in between, are just as important when we talk about the environment in the Philippines. But let's go now to the next, just the same week after.
Same week ba? That week, grabe. So actually, itong buong episode na rap natin, actually just happened a week.
Actually, now that I
siya.
think about it, everything that we're talking about right now
happened
in just a week. So the next story is Typhoon Karina and the habagat that it
Habagat
enhanced.
and Typhoon Karina.
Wala tayong binibigyan ng mas interchangeable.
Okay.
Okay, so nasan tayo? Where were we when Karina, nasan ka when Karina happened?
Nasa bahay. nasa bahay. I was supposed to cover an event I was excited about. Tapos, hindi ako, mga petty burgess problems. Hindi ako makabook ng Grab. Kasi nga malakas na yung ulan. Tapos yun, nagbabaha na papunta sa Metro Manila. So, yun nga, wala nang And then, nagka-cancel na rin pa isa-isa. Makikita mo yun sa Telegram, sa email. Parang nag-ano na yung mga reporters, cancel yung ganong coverage, cancel yung ganyan. And then, the rain lasted.
Actually, nung SONA, maulan na din, di ba? But it got, I think, so SONA was Monday, Tuesday, medyo tuloy-tuloy na rin yung rain. But the rain during Karina, during yung talagang onslaught niya, it was different. And it really, for many people, it really felt like Ondoy. And I don't know kung nasan ka ng Ondoy, but ako, I remember clearly na...
May episode na tayo nagtawag na natin i-bring up yung mga
natin yung Ondoy. But for me, it did feel like Ondoy. I mean, ano lang as in feeling lang. Walang evidence, walang anything. Just the how it felt waiting for the rain to stop, but it never does. And it's going on, sobrang lakas niya for hours on end. So for many people, and your story is about this, na it did feel like Ondoy, but not quite. Parang
not quite, kasi when you look at the data, and parang, naging discussion, naging mahabang discussion din natin to, na parang, bakit not quite? So, yung rainfall volume kasi ng Ondoy ay, kasi numbers, 455 millimeters from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Ang na-measure sa Science Garden, sa QC.
That's Ondoy?
That's Ondoy. So,
2009 Ondoy, for those who are who can remember.
Hoy, naalala ko pa, nagpapasa ako ng libro nun.
Ay, ayun.
Kasi walang pasok.
So that's Ondoy from 2009.
Yeah, and then the data that we got from Pag-asa when we called like a day or 2 days after, a day after, was 324.5 millimeters ang rainfall volume. So, mas onti siya. Pero iba-iba rin yun, I think, reported na data, no? Kasi para may nag-measure from 2 a.m. to
May ibang time frame.
But 324.5 millimeters was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Kasi yun ang standard sa World Meteorological Organization. So, not quite, but people felt, no, at least nakikita natin online, yung mga sentiments ng mga tao na this is like Ondoy. Kasi yun nga, because of the continuous pounding rain. And then the flooding.
And it felt like a lot of, pero ito, observation, because we're more online right now than compared to 2009. I think mas marami tayong nakikitang places na, binaha pala yun. Like, binaha pala yung lugar na yun. Because before, noong 2009, we heard, at least, na talagang yung Marikina was badly affected talaga. Badly hit siya noong 2009. Pero now, nung Karina, more than Marikina, other places were also affected.
Yeah.
So people felt it, but yun nga, in simpler terms, mas mahaba yung time period na umuulan kay Karina. Tama ba?
Sa habagat.
Habagat enhanced by Karina. Oo,
yes.
nga pala.
Nuance po, nuance.
Sorry, ang dami kasi nangyari. Oo nga pala. It's the habagat na in-enhance ni Karina. Compared to Ondoy, na mas marami siyang pinor na rain in a shorter period of time.
Yeah. So, tama, mas malakas
So, mas
siya.
malakas siya.
Right. And because also Ondoy made landfall. Karina did not. So, ito habagat.
Pero gano'n na siya kalakas, hindi siya nag-landfall, but it's just as strong, which is, an indication of climate
parang
change.
When we were discussing it, parang parang we're comparing apples to oranges, right? But also, I think yung ganong sentiment na, of course, kina-compare ng mga tao sa Ondoy, kind of comes from a frustration na, nangyari na to nung Ondoy. Tapos, bakit nangyayari ngayon? Tapos, hindi pa nga, habagat pa nga to, enhanced by typhoon. Hindi pa nga nag-landfall yung typhoon.
So, I think it's trauma. Collective memory natin kasi ang Ondoy eh. And actually, hindi lang Ondoy. I remember may isang habagat na nangyari right after Ondoy that medyo malakas din. Pero, syempre, habagat siya, so hindi ko alam kailan siya but I do remember na merong habagat na kasing lakas din. Meron ding Glenda. I mean, a lot of these typhoons have already and weather disturbances have already impacted the Metro Manila. Kaya it's so ironic na ang ibinida ng presidente natin earlier in the week is flood control project.
And then like two days.
Yes.
2 days, 3 days.
Na-test na agad yung flood control project.
Oo.
Kasi diba parang thousands daw of flood.
5,500 ang completed
alala mo na ang number of flood control projects. So, when we cover disasters as environment journalists, I think what stands out is because we know that this is climate change happening and parang mas, parang for me hindi ko afford to feel helpless. Although, some people do, di ba, during these times. Hindi mo in-expect na ganito kalakas eh. I mean, you can only, may forecasts, but the real thing, it's never always as what you expect. So parang, for me, but because we're journalists and we have been doing this for how many years already, we kind of know what the protocol already is during disaster coverages, di ba? Na parang, this is public service, this is, what we want is information that's accurate, that's fast, and that's real-time. And naalala ko kasi, one of the things na kinover natin is the barge dun sa Pasig.
Yung sa Pasig area, Marikina River, yung mga barge na...
Diba? And so yung mga ganong information, parang kailangan mo siyang, tayo as environment journalists, it's also an indication of how the environment is becoming a bigger story na. Hindi na lang siya, it's beyond the scope of the environment beat already. Kasi, kunyari, for disaster coverages like this, talagang we're bringing the whole newsroom into the coverage. Yeah. So,
hindi nga ako na-deploy sa bahay.
Parang masama yung loob mo.
Hindi kasi, I think, hindi na makakadaan papunta sa amin. Right. I mean, hindi kami binabaha, pero yung papunta, baha na siya.
Correct. Ayun, so...
Yeah, but dagdag lang. pag yung mga ganong, I don't think parang naramdaman ko na helpless or something because of the adrenaline.
Kasi nga hindi ikaw yung pinadala?
Hindi. Hindi, pag naramdaman mo na parang, ay, lakas na ulan. Tapos parang, mararamdaman mo na magiging, siya, newsroom coverage. Syempre, unang instinct mo parang, okay, cancel lahat ng, planadong coverage mo for that day. Tapos, lahat kayo, OT. So, lahat kayo, all in this together, you're gonna stay up late.
Right.
Kasi, nyo talaga yung developments ng habagat, tsaka pagbaha.
But it's also after the disaster, going back to, anong gagawin natin? What's next? Anong gagawin natin as journalists to keep the climate change story something na hindi lang siya, it's not just a science story, it's really becoming the story of our time. So, kaya importante, again, babalik sa SONA, kaya importanteng we keep our leaders accountable, our local leaders accountable. Parang, tuwin na lang, and this is just, this is just the third. ABC. This is just the third storm in, habagat.
And also, parang laging sinasabi kasi na climate crisis, environment journalists should take a step back. So usually, ideally, 'di ba, after ng coverage ng disasters, of course, magfo-focus ka sa response, sa developments on ground. So wala pang time masyadong mag-macro view. So dapat after 'yun nangyayari. But what happened the next day was merong report sa PCG na may lumubog na ba?
Ito na.
So, wala yung chance to breathe.
Actually, oo nga. Ngayon ko lang na-realize, when I was preparing for this episode, hindi ko talaga na-realize na, no.
Isang linggo lang siya.
Isang linggo lang nangyari lahat ng pinag-uusapan natin today. So, just the next day, just a few hours after...
Yeah. Kasi 1 a.m. lumubog
Oo, kasi 1 a.m. Actually, parang nangyari na mag-distress calls na ata July 24 actually. Pero baka nag-capsize siya ng July 25. That's what I heard. So what we're talking about is the
oil spill, the Bataan oil
spill. The Bataan oil spill where motor tanker Terra Nova capsized and submerged off Limay. Tama ba?
Limay, Bataan.
Yes.
Yeah, July 25.
On July 25, and it was a motor tanker with 1.4 million
industrial fuel.
Yes. So, what do we know so far? It's been 2 weeks. We've been covering it.
2 weeks
yes,
na?
almost. Tomorrow,
weeks.
almost 2 weeks na since it capsized. What we do know right now is hindi pa nagsistart yung...
Hindi pa siya nagsistart. Nung umpisa, nung lumubog siya, parang what the Coast Guard was saying was, okay, this will be easier than... Of course, when we say easier, when we compare it, pag nagko-comparative na language tayo, we're always comparing it to MT Princess Empress sa Oriental Mindoro.
Which happened last year?
Last year lang.
February 2023.
So the PCG at first was saying na this is easier, this is not technical because lumubog siya on shallower waters. So parang what will happen was you're gonna seal the leaking valves and then you're gonna tow it near the shoreline kung saan magtutuloy-tuloy yung siphoning operations. So that was what they were saying the first few days. And then eventually, delay na ng 2 weeks kasi papalitan yung cap ng valves, etc. It turned out na medyo mas komplikado pala siya than what we all expected.
And right now, almost 2 weeks in, thousands of fisherfolk are already affected.
In Bataan,
in Cavite. Those are the worst hit. Provinces. And the authorities, the DOJ and the Cavite governor are planning to sue the ship owner.
Yeah.
Ayun,
so of course sa coverage, parang yung umpisa ay yung immediate oil spill response operation. So what we're talking about is how do we contain the oil? And then reports came out na may oil slick na nakita sa Bulacan, sa Cavite. These are coming from photojournalists na. Not from the Coast Guard. And then eventually, ngayon, nakikita na natin, almost 2 weeks in, the conversation is now going towards accountability. Kasi ngayon mas nakikita natin epekto sa mga mangingisda, kung paano hindi na sila makabenta ng isda kasi nga ayaw na ng mga taong bumili ng isda because of the oil spill. Siyempre, takot din sila, takot yung consumers. So, ngayon, that's the conversation that we're having, yung accountability. Not so much na nga sa containment, but an update on the containment. Nagawa na daw yung metal caps and we're expecting na isisil na yung valves with the metal caps na made just for that
So,
for that
is it
response.
earlier than the 2 weeks? Di ba't by 2 weeks dapat madedelay yung...
Yeah, mukha. Bibilang ako. Kailan ko ba sinulat yung storya na yun? Yeah, mukha. Kasi ang estimate nila ay 2 weeks to make the caps and then to install them. Pero mukhang mas mabilis ngayon. Mukha mas mabilis.
But before we go into the impact and the accountability, bakit ba nagkakaroon ng oil spills? why, I mean, this is the second year. Well, actually, some oil spills more minor have been reported in other areas in the Philippines. But in the first place, why do these things happen? Why? Bakit?
It's a combination of human error and nature. So dito human error like mistakes, yung bang pinalayag na vessel ay seaworthy. Kung hindi siya seaworthy, bakit siya pinayagan lumayag?
Right.
Meron ba siyang proper documents? So that's one side of it. And then another that causes the accident ay nature. So kung rough weather, kung rough seas, ayan, yun yung mga magpapalubog sa barko. But also, kung rough weather, parang bakit
lumayag in the first place? So those are the questions na kailang inaalam pa natin.
Even the natural na nagpapalubog ng barko. Of course, lagi siyang merong human component. Bakit pinayagan lumayag? Bakit ganito, ganyan?
That's why supposedly there are systems in place to prevent it. Kasi hindi naman pwedeng year in, year out, lagi tayong may oil spill. We shouldn't be, hindi dapat tayo masanay na nangyayari to because it's affecting lives and livelihood and ecosystems although merong natural process of the oil.
Yeah, the oil weathers in its by itself.
Sinulat mo rin to last year.
Sinulat ko din siya last year kasi sa Oriental Mindoro. Pero yun, parang the point pa nga nung na-interview ko na scientist ay at some point, marine life could weather the oil spill. Kasi may mga natural processes naman na talaga mangyayari sa tubig. But the question that I posed there was, will we be able to weather it as humans? As yung mga mangingisda na nag-aantay ng compensation, gaano katagal yun?
Right.
Parang, kasi sa Oriental Mindoro, at least sa Pola, parang 1 taon na nung lumubog yung MT Princess Empress, hindi pa rin nila nakuha yung full compensation. So yun yung abangan din natin ngayon sa Bataan oil spill. Cavite Governor John Vic Remulla was saying na, or a lot of them are saying na, of course, they're trying na hindi ganun katagal, hindi katulad nung sa Oriental Mindoro. Pero let's see kung if we learned our lesson.
Right. And is this bakit, siguro ang iniisip ng mga iba, bakit siya environmental story? Why it's tayo yung tumututok. Oo, ang nagko-cover nitong oil spills actually. And ano nang gagawin natin? Parang do we just another oil spill? Okay, alam na para na siyang bagyo na alam mo na kung ano yung gagawin. Parang
automatic. May template yung coverage.
Oo, parang so this is an environmental story. I think mas obvious siya last year. During the Princess Empress. Kasi nga, it's the Verde Island Passage na mostly affected. But it's still an environment and affected pa rin yung bodies of water natin here sa Manila Bay, Bataan, and then again sa Cavite. It's an environmental story because yung mga natin, it all goes back to yun nga, yung sa ginagamit tong oil na tinatransport, di ba? So it's just an echo. Pare-parehas lang siya it's all connected,
the
it's all interconnected.
From fossil fuel industry,
right.
It spilled on the sea, it affected marine life, marine ecosystems, tapos Manila Bay pa, malaking environmental
iba pa yun.
Story.
Iba pang usapan ang Manila Bay, right?
So, you're looking at mangroves, wala pa kasi tayo nakukuhang extent or estimate ng extent and cost of
usually this comes
damage.
from the DENR, right?
Yes, pero ngayon wala pa. So, ayun. And of course, affected yung marine life, yung isda, yung shellfish, which in turn affects fisher folk. So, environment stories, na may people stories.
Right.
Domino
and where do we
siya.
go from here, Iya Gozum?
Managot yung kailangan managot. Pero mahirap yan.
And that's
Matagal
another, it's a long conversation, but it's something that we try to cover even. Parang, kasi minsan, we know what happened from MTM Princess Empress for months. Yun yung laman ng balita, di ba? Until other news happened, other stories happened. But siguro ang aim natin is those most affected, the communities that kasi sila yung immediately apektado nung nangyari. And most of these fisher folk, kung hindi sila layag, tama ba? Kung sila makapangisda, makapamalakaya, right. Apektado na agad yung daily income nila. So, it's the compensation due them. And I think, di ba? I mean, that's the bare minimum. They deserve to be, and that's why we cover stories like the oil spill, because ultimately it's these people and these fisher folk, yung kanilang ambag sa ating, napaka-importante ng mga fisher folk sa ating sa ating ekonomiya. Right. So,
and also, I mean, the other side of that coin, I think mas madali kasi siyang gawan ng storya, in a sense, na mangingisda, kailangan mabigyan sila ng compensation. Pero the other side of that coin, yun yung tougher. Parang how do you hold accountable the people that needs, the entities, the parties that need to be held accountable? Kasi if the MT Princess Empress oil spill incident is of any indication,
it's going to take a while.
The compensation. Pero yung accountability.
The accountability.
Did we hear anything?
And in
diba?
this case, yun, kailangan natin sagutin yung mga ganong tanong.
Ano na tayo, walking on eggshells na tayo. Kasi, I mean, totoo naman yung mga sinasabi ng environmental groups, meron bang nanagot? Parang nagkaroon ng mga hearings about the Oriental Mindoro oil spill, pero what did that achieve exactly? So, yun, hihintayin din natin
magka-hearing ulit.
Dapat may hearing early this week sa House, pero na-cancel.
Right.
So, hintay ulit tayo.
But, yeah, that was, actually, mali pala ako, it's just July. July lang nangyari lahat ng nangyaring yun.
Okay.
July pa lang yun, and we still have
pero parang yun na-wrap natin for the
we still have 5 months to go in 2024. So, aabangan natin lahat ng mga developments in all those issues. But for more news and updates about all things environment, you can join the Environment and Science chat room of the Rappler Communities app. Andun kami ni Iya. Pwede kaming tag. You can download the Rappler Communities app on your mobile. It is available to download on iOS at Android. You can also access it via desktop at communities.rappler.com. So, kita-kits sa Rappler Communities app at hanggang sa susunod na episode. Bye!
Bye!